Hello, everyone. As most of you know, my name is Greg Stafford, and among other things, I'm well known for being one of Jehovah's Witnesses and for previously having done public debates, both in person and on radio, with well-known figures on other sides, and for having written books, several editions, defending beliefs commonly associated with Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower Society. However, around 2002, 2003, I began to see that there were things that the Watchtower was teaching I simply could not defend using the Bible and the best available reasons. What were some of these? Well, the main issue at that time was the way that the society was teaching people about the uses of blood and whether or not blood fractions or blood components should be rejected the same way that whole blood is spoken of in the Bible, at least in terms of eating and drinking, but in several texts and Acts it just uses the verb abstain with no specific use stated, although I believe contextually the only credible uses that could have been in mind there were the ones talked about in the Old Testament, eating and drinking whole blood. Nevertheless, because there's no stated use that's part of that prohibition in Acts, I tried to defend the society even where it concerned the use of whole blood to at least show that there was a scriptural basis for abstaining from whole blood no matter what. But what I could not defend from the Bible, or even the best available medical reasons, is the way the society proceeded and has proceeded before I tried to defend them with regard to blood fractions and blood components. The society does not require people to completely abstain from the use of blood, as if, according to the Hebrew scriptures, it's to be poured out on the ground. They permit whole blood to be extracted from the human body, stored, and then fractionated, and then for some of those fractions to be used in medical treatments. So I reached a point where just using the Bible, I was no longer able to explain the differences in their views with regard to blood, blood components, or blood fractions. I also began to realize that even though I did not then, and still to a large extent now, wouldn't classify the Watchtower Society as a false prophet, they get pretty close. And I think an argument can be made. But when it comes to many of the quotes, the things that a lot of anti-Watchtower people wrote about and tried to use to show that they were a false prophet, there were a lot of holes. A lot of misrepresentations, in fact. And so I was able to show that the way people were attacking the Watchtower Society was incorrect. They were either missing information, not quoting information correctly, or at times outright lying. But what I could not ignore, based on the things that they've changed, the things that they've taught before, was the obvious fact that they have been and are today, in many respects, false teachers. Why do I say that? Because they keep teaching things that are not correct, and they're not changing their errors when they're presented with evidence. So, for example, when it comes to teachings like the generation that Jesus said would not pass away until all these things occur, related to the end time events, Jehovah's Witnesses have had a number of views of that generation. And they've, in large part in their history, tied it to their view of the chronology they see as leading to 1914, as the time when God's kingdom became established in the heavens, and then several years later they were appointed as his representative. So now their teaching is no longer that the generation that saw the events of 1914 would not pass away until everything, including the end of the system, occurs, but that there's an overlapping generation of people. that didn't see any of those events in 1914 as they occurred, or even thereafter to a large extent. So they have definitely promoted teachings that are incorrect for a long time, even promising for God in their Awake magazine that the generation that saw those events would not pass away, and similar other things that can really only be classified as false, incorrect. So whether or not they're a prophet or not, like Moses, to me wasn't the biggest issue when I started to realize I could no longer defend all of the issues and beliefs common to the Watchtower Society and Jehovah's Witnesses associated with them. So after my second edition of Jehovah's Witnesses Defended, I began to prepare a more balanced treatment that would allow me to explain further some of the things I just discussed, and how, while I still disagree with some of the criticisms against the Watchtower Society, there are things that they have taught and teach that are of concern, that are incorrect. So I felt obligated to have a more balanced discussion of the blood issue, their chronology, and certain organizational teachings that are unique to them. And I put that more balanced view in a book called 3 Dissertations on the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. After I released that book in the early 2000s, I had a falling out with the Watchtower apologist community. And prior to this time, I had also worked with someone many of you know, Rolf Ferrulli, a very well-known Watchtower advocate, at least until recently. And Rolf and I worked together closely on several projects, especially, or in particular, his book, The Role of Theology and Bias in Bible Translation, with a special look at the New World Translation. I helped Rolf edit it, and I published it, at least the first edition. But when I released 3 Dissertations and a more balanced view, at least as I saw it, of the Society and its teachings, I had a falling out with Rolf and really the entire Watchtower apologist community. And so I began to pull back from all activity associated with Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower, because to that point, really, that was the only religion I knew. The only way to live as a Christian was from the Watchtower point of view. And I had done everything I could in ways that were, in some respects, quite unique to the society and the organization. Not many, if any, were standing up and doing public debates with well-known figures like Robert M. Bowman Jr., or Dr. James White, or Dr. Morey. The last one happened a little bit later. Not to mention the different books that I was writing. So things seemed to be opening up nicely for those of us who were taking the lead to try to defend our beliefs in a deeper, more scholastic way that would give our brothers faith, confidence, because of all the criticisms that people were making, and that we as people who are on the front line, going door to door and preaching in other areas on behalf of the Watchtower Society, we were having to deal with all the time. So even though things were looking good in those ways, once I became critical of some of the things the Society was teaching or had taught in the past, things changed. Excuse me. So I had to pull back. I stopped associating with the Watchtower Society. And I just really became more of a, I guess you could say, worldly person, in the sense that I was no longer actively promoting religion. I wasn't really sure what to do, because everything that I knew, as I mentioned, was in association with the Watchtower Society. And I really didn't see any other group as promoting the divine name, belief in one God the Father, and not getting involved in things like wars in ways that would show a lack of love for your neighbor, the golden rule, treating others the way you want to be treated. So I didn't see that I could join another group, and I didn't feel I was capable as an individual to just start going door to door or doing the things that I had come to learn in terms of ministry through the Watchtower. So for several years, from at least the end of 2003 through 2006, early part of 2006, I didn't do anything religious. And I became associated with people in business, developed relationships that allowed me to establish my own insurance claim adjusting company. I started writing on those subjects, even published a book about property claims adjusting, started to take that life seriously. But something kept nagging at me. Does God exist? I kept coming back to it. Can I show reasonably he exists or not? Should I just let this go? Because to me, I needed to have some kind of understanding about life. Are we here because of an accident? Do we just not know? Or is there someone I can identify, a creator, that I can follow? So I started to think about life and science and how we verify things using science, the proper scientific method. And I realized we're here. We're here. We exist right now. We're alive. Life can only scientifically come from existing life. There are no exceptions, not even one. And that's when I realized that scientifically, life must be eternal because we're here now. Once I realized that, I understood that the objection to the argument that, well, if God made everything, who made God, has no merit because scientifically life is eternal. So to ask the question, who made God, is unscientific. Life is eternal, and while we may not be able to go so far back that we can understand how God could not have been created, we have a basis for believing that. We're here now. And there's no example of how we could be here now except from existing life. And that chain cannot be broken and life still be here. Then I recognized that life shows the marks of intelligence. We have bilateral symmetry. Creatures that exist today are fully formed, right? There's some obviously deformed creatures and mutations that occur, but they don't mutate into fully formed, capable species. They don't. They never have and they never will based on everything that's happened to this point. So I realized you combine all that, all the various systems of the earth, the different ways that the planets and the moons and the sun and the solar system and the galaxies operate, the precision by which we can time those things, those are marks of intelligence. It's something someone designed. Based on everything else that we think about when we think of a design, I had to conclude that life is not only eternal, but it's very intelligent. Then I had to find out whether or not our history, our religions, our texts, our records, did they contain enough information for me to identify this eternal intelligent life in? Or was I just left with this understanding that there is an eternal intelligent life, but that I can't really find him or her or whatever it is in these ancient religions, in these texts? I went first to the Bible, of course, because I'm already familiar with the Bible at this point, and not just in a superficial way. Again, I've debated texts in the Bible where I had to become familiar with the original languages. I had taken several courses in linguistics, a course in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, and in Greek. And then I've studied on my own so frequently that I understood how to really find out what these texts were saying. I started with Genesis. And all you have to do to see what I found out is look at my videos on Genesis and the texts that we read about together and explored to show that everything it describes, is correct. It's defensible. It's not legendary in any fable or non-historical sense. It's historical, it's scientific, it makes sense. And then I started to look at Jesus, the things having to do with him, the pre-Christian texts that predicted or foretold someone like him, according to the text in the New Testament that we hold as reliable in comparison to all these other ancient records that tell us different things that most of us believe. The Bible's record of what happened is the best. By far. It's not even close. Once I came to that conclusion, I realized I need to do this again. Right? I do have a reason to follow the Christ, Jesus. I do have a reason to worship the God of the Bible, Jehovah, Jah. I started thinking about the different things that I had learned in the Watchtower and where they were wrong and what I needed to do in order to be correct in worshiping this God and in following the Messiah and treating others the way I wanted to be treated. I had a lot of people still contacting me here or there, wanting to know what I was doing, coming to me for questions about things that I had debated or written about. So I knew there were a lot of people still interested in these things. And I had come to a point where I could see eternal intelligent life was the right conclusion, defensible, and that the Bible and the God of the Bible and the Messiah of the Bible was also defensible. And that's when in 2006 I realized that I needed to get going again, to start doing the things I always wanted to do when I came to the Watchtower religion. And that I think almost everyone who comes to the Watchtower Society believes in when they first come in. The belief in God, the God of the Bible. The belief in Jesus, the Messiah of the Bible. Treating others the way you want to be treated, a fair principle that puts you above hypocrisy if you follow it. So I knew that, like with the word Christian, which is biblical, of course, but so many religions call themselves that, including Jehovah's Witnesses, that I needed something that would distinguish what I was going to do and the people who wanted to do it with me, so they weren't confused, so they didn't think I was just still doing the Watchtower religion or anything else, but what I wanted to define as what I believed was the most important to concentrate on as a Christian. Belief in God, the Father, the one God of the Bible, explicitly taught that in 1 Corinthians 8:6, that his name in the least controversial sense and pronunciation was Jah, found not only in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Psalms and Isaiah and other texts, but in Revelation 19 as well, even in the New Testament. So I realized that was the best form of the name to use to get away from all this argument and how to pronounce his name. Just go with Jah. Nobody really questions it. And it's in both Testaments. And I understood also from Jesus' teaching that worshiping that God and following the golden rule were the most important things, that he summarized as fulfilling the entire law, along with him as the Messiah. Those were the three things I realized were more important, more clear and explicit in the Bible than anything else. And that there was no real reason for me to make an issue over anything else, because we're told over and over by the biblical Messiah, Jesus, in Matthew 7, for example, and by his earliest followers such as Paul, that we're not to be judging anyone else. We're taught this explicitly in Romans 14. We're taught that we are not to believe or try to please everybody in Galatians 1. We're taught that we're not supposed to be judging people over festivals, new moons, Colossians. So I realized that there was no point in making issues out of any of that stuff, because we're not supposed to be making judgments over that anyway. We're supposed to be worshiping the God of the Bible, promoting the biblical Christ, and treating each other fairly. and letting each person answer to the Messiah, the Master. None of us are masters in that way. So I started to call myself a Christian witness of Jah, and I started writing again. I debated Dr. Mori on the radio in 2006. I kept writing. Then, because I had made many personal associations in the world prior to 2006, I had to go through a period of difficulty because I had made associations with a lot of people who turned out to be criminals, people who were defrauding insurance companies and using me to help further their fraud. And I'm going to do a separate video on my other channel explaining more about that. But once I was confronted by several of the people involved in the fraud because they wanted me to give up some of my fees, I had to stop doing that. And that put me in a period of difficulty for quite a while. I had to totally redesign my career and life, which I have. But I kept active, doing things I believed were right with respect to eternal intelligent life, the biblical Messiah, the God Jah, and the Golden Rule from 2006 forward, even going through that difficulty with different people in the world and people who were committing fraud and lying to me and using me. Once I got through that and I was able to stabilize my economy, my employment, my income, then I was really able to focus more on what I needed to do to give people the proper view of how to worship the God of the Bible, apart from groups that continued to attach worship of the God of the Bible with things that were not correct. So I started doing different things. I created a forum where people can go, the Christian Witnesses of Jah discussion forum, which is still there today. I started presenting different quotes and things from the Bible and from different ancient sources. I started tweeting them as day texts. And eventually, because of my knowledge of the Bible and the ancient languages, I realized, I can just translate these texts pretty easily, and I'll present those translations as my day text tweets. I started doing that, and then I reached a point where I was developing more and more translations, and so I started to see the possibility that I could prepare one of my own. I'm still working on it. It's a very difficult process, and it takes a lot of time to do right. But I don't think you need to wait for my translation of the Bible. It's just something I'm doing in my own time, and that helped me get through these different periods of great difficulty. I believe you can use any translation of the Bible as long as you understand the terms in the Bible, such as God, and how it is and isn't used. Nevertheless, I then reached a point where people wanted me to do even more, like these videos. And so in 2018, I set up the CW JahTube channel, and I started doing videos of my day texts. That's why the first several shows are day texts. They're now text readings because after getting into Genesis, the narratives that we were reading were longer than just a text that you could read and talk about the start of a day. Kind of like the Watchtower does, but in a different way. So now we do more extended readings where we really get into it and discuss it, which is why I encourage you to watch my Genesis videos if you want more about how I see those ancient records being both accurate and historically correct. Accurate scientifically and historically correct. Once I started doing the CW JahTube videos, I started hearing from a lot more people who were in the Watchtower Society still. And I had fallen out, as I mentioned at the start of this video, with pretty much the entire Watchtower apologist community, including Rolf Feruli. But when I started doing the CW JahTube videos, people started telling me different things. And I found out just in the past year that Rolf Feruli had been disfellowshipped, which was very surprising to me because Rolf has always been a strong supporter of the society, as I was for many years. But Rolf was one of those who, was pretty harsh with me after I decided to break from the society, publish 3 dissertations, and become critical about several things the Watchtower Society had done or was doing, things they had taught or were teaching. So I just never expected Rolf to be disfellowshipped. But I know, of course, anything can happen. But it was a big surprise to me. When I heard that, and as I began to hear from others around the world, elders and others, friends of mine from long ago, that the society was becoming more and more difficult to be in, more militant, more restrictive, less Bible-based than even before in the ways that I had begun to see. I realized there was a problem bigger than when I had left. And that began distressing me because I know a lot of people in the organization love Jehovah. They do. I did. But they are going through periods of testing in ways where it's just hard for them to be who they want to be and to break free like I did and worship the God of the Bible apart from traditions of humans. But when I began to hear all this about Rolf and all these other things from other people I knew, I recognized there was a real problem now, that they were losing a lot of their long-standing and strongest supporters. And so to me, that indicated it was getting even worse. And so I'm a very optimistic person. If I believe something is possible, I go after it. I try to make it happen until I see it's not going to happen. I'm realistic, but I'm very optimistic. So I started to think and plan with certain people in the organization about how I might be able to come back. Not come back and just teach everything they're teaching, but come back and try to set an example about what we should be teaching. Try to deal with the difficulties that I was hearing about in ways, and maybe even work with Rolf and other people to try to help keep people's faith alive. It distressed me greatly that we might continue to see people leaving the society and losing their faith at the same time, because the society ties themselves and their teaching so much to biblical approval that, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, when I stopped being active with them around 2002, 2003, I couldn't do anything. And I had publicly defended them in debates. I had written books defending Bible teachings and society's teachings. But I couldn't really see a way to gain traction doing ministry type things, because all I knew was in association with the Watchtower. So I could see the difficulty everybody would be having, that we're now having these similar doubts in a more noticeable way. Like people that I never thought would leave the society being disfellowshipped, and then others coming to me and expressing deep concern. So I started to think, well, there's a lot of people here that could get hurt and lose their faith. Is there a way I can go back and help change things from within, openly, not hiding, just, I want to help, right? We should consider changing some of these things, making these things better, leaving these things off from our belief system. And then as I read parts of Rolf's book that he wrote, His Beloved Religion, I realized he was thinking kind of the same thing, right? That there are things we could do that would help establish a way that might change the society's less scriptural and some unscriptural teachings and views, so that we could keep the main things, like the 3 things that I hold as true. Belief in one God the Father, Jah, Jesus as the Messiah, the Golden Rule. And even if they wanted to continue with other things taught explicitly in the Bible, if we could get rid of the things that were not biblical and even unscriptural, we could save a lot of people's faith and have kind of a core group of a lot of people to move forward with a new thing. So I started really looking into what the Society has been teaching, their New World Translation of 2013, just in the last 6 months or so, really heavily. And extremely deeply in the last couple of months, I would say, so that I could determine whether or not this was possible. Because I really wasn't watching what they were doing or interested at all. In that brief video that's online, Are You One of Jehovah's Witnesses? I make it plain in there what my perspective was up to 2018 and even until several months recently, that they've made mistakes. They're not Jah or Jesus, so I let them be. I was not interested. I hadn't really read or studied at all the 2013 NWT until just the past few months. I just didn't care, right? I have my own work that I'm doing, and that's where I care. But then I started to see this possibility of returning and taking the good and leaving the bad and creating something new. It even fits in with what I'm studying right now in terms of integrative thinking and learning. But it just made sense to me that there's so many people who still believe in God, the same God I do, who still accept the Messiah, the same Messiah I do, and who believe in the golden rule, but who are having trouble dealing with the society and the things that they're teaching outside of the Bible and that even contradict it. So I saw this as a possibility to do a great deal of good with people who were now ready like me, like Rolf Feruli. And so in preparation for that, in preparation for going back to help change things from within, openly and honestly believing that I would have God's Spirit and they'd either officially disfellowship me or begin to listen, I was willing to take a chance. Right? Because I can keep doing what I'm doing either way. It doesn't matter a whole lot. But I saw the upside as being really big if I could do that, if I could help with that. So I started to look closely at what they've been doing. I went to jw.org. I started comparing the 2013 New World Translation with the pre-2013 versions. I started watching different broadcast videos by the governing body. And I realize now I can't go back. There's nothing I can do to help save this organization. The only thing I can do is to continue doing what I can show is true from the Bible and helping as many people as I can do the same who want to. The organization has to be willing to change, to make adjustments, or there's no good that's going to come from me trying to change them when they don't want to make adjustments. What made me think that they won't make adjustments? I'm going to share with you one video. There are a lot of things I could bring up that I've discovered and found that have happened since 2003, since the time I was more active with the Society. But I'm just going to share one because I think it's enough. So I'm going to pull up a video by a member of the governing body that's on jw.org, and I'd like you to watch parts of it with me. I'm going to summarize some of the parts because I don't want to play the whole video. I'll link it below. But I'll explain the parts I'm summarizing, and then we'll go to each clip that I want to show and discuss with you. And then after that, I want us to review together some explicit biblical texts. And I believe that by the end of the rest of this video, you will better understand why I do not support the Watchtower Society. And I don't believe there'll be anything I can do if I go back. And that it's best if I continue doing what I'm doing exactly as I'm doing it right now, or even better. So let me bring up the video that I want us to review together. This is Garrett Loesch, a member of the governing body, and he's giving a talk, In Whom Do You Trust? Sounds kind of simple, right? At least if you believe the Bible and you think the Bible's right. Excuse me. Let me play a few sections for you. I'm not adding anything to the video. This isn't a quote-unquote apostate video. It's right on jw.org. And I just want you to hear what I heard that really made me accept the position that I now adopt, that I cannot go back in any meaningful way, and that the best thing I can do is continue along the way that I'm on by following the example of Jesus. So let's hear the first 11 seconds of the video, and then I'm going to stop it and make a brief comment, and then we'll continue along.
Trust is a base.
Let me go ahead and just start at the beginning.
The theme for this month is, in whom do you trust? Do you trust me? I hope so. All of us want to be trusted.
I never want you to trust me. If you trust me, you have no part with me, and I don't really want to have any part with you. I want you to trust the objective evidence that I present if you believe it is correct. You're not to trust any human. So when he starts out by saying that he hopes you trust him, that's problem number one. Because no Christian should hope that you trust us. If by that you mean anything outside of the evidence that you've come to see that we present to you that you can then test and accept for yourself. Never trust me. Trust the evidence that you see and that you can believe in as correct.
Trust is a basic element of everyday life. To trust others is a normal reaction. Many of us have traveled on a train or a bus. Did we worry whether the conductor or driver would bring us safely to our destination? Normally, we do not worry. We trust an airplane captain to take us safely to our destination. We trust that when we enter an elevator, that it will not crash at the bottom of the shaft, but safely take us to the desired floor.
What if the bus driver or the pilot or the elevator had a track record of crashing, of breaking down? Would you trust any of those sources? I doubt you would. So the analogies presented here make no sense. Because the Watchtower Society has broken down many times. They have taught things that are not correct. They have crashed people's faith numerous times by promoting confidence in dates and in end-time prophecies we're not even supposed to be writing about, according to Paul in his letters to the Thessalonians, where he emphasizes that it's going to happen as a thief in the night when they say peace and security. That's it. And then he says we don't need anything to be written to us about times and seasons. That's the most prominent subject of Watchtower Society literature. So this analogy, these series of analogies are dangerous because they give you the most optimistic view of bus drivers, pilots, and elevators without giving the counterexample of if they weren't reliable, if they had broken down, would you still trust them? Well, the answer would be no. You'd be, at a minimum, far more cautious, and if you're like me, you'd probably find another bus. You'd probably get another plane, and you would likely step on to a totally different elevator. He goes on to summarize the meaning of trust from dictionary sources and other expert sources that show he has a very clear understanding of the significance of the word trust. And again, I'm going to link this whole video below. I encourage you to watch it all, but I'm going to summarize a few parts so we can get to the most important comments and why I believe I can no longer return and help these people the way I was considering. Let's move forward to minute 3, second 30. And here, the text from Proverbs 14:15 is cited. The naive person believes every word, but the shrewd one ponders each step. The naive person believes every word. Watchtower Society members, do you believe every word of the governing body? Do you have complete trust in everything taught by the governing body? The very text that Loesch is using in this talk about whom to trust says not to do that. You're naive if you do that. So let's see what the further context is in which he presents that. He goes on to talk about how Jehovah completely trusted Jesus in the creation, in the one as being the one through whom all things were made, and in becoming a man to die faithful, how Jesus completely trusted in God to resurrect him. Like Galatians 1:1 teaches, the Father raised him up from the dead, gave him a spiritual body, and then after that, he raised up his physical body. He speaks about Abraham trusting God to raise Isaac if he were in fact sacrificed, where he was being tested to show that in that line they would have the trait necessary for the Messiah's body to similarly submit to the sacrifice he would give as the last Adam. He talks about Moses trusting in God as he led the people out of Egypt, and about Daniel's 3 friends trusting in God by not bowing down to an idol image, even in the face of death. Now let's move forward to minute 10. After those points are made, minute 10.
We might be confronted with scary challenges and tests.
Just a couple seconds before that.
As we are getting ever closer to the Great Tribulation, we might be confronted with scary challenges.
I wanted to play that to point out that even right now, as well as way back when I was still active, the Watchtower Society does not believe the Great Tribulation has happened yet. But they still identify all non-anointed members as the great crowd. The great crowd isn't here yet, my friends. The great crowd appears, according to Revelation 7, after the Great Tribulation. They have had people believing they're the great crowd that isn't here yet for almost 100 years, back to the time of Rutherford in the 30s. And they've prevented you from partaking of the emblems which are for all Christians, because they're identifying you as someone who could not possibly be here yet. I wanted to point that out because that's very significant. But it's not the main reason why I cannot return to them. Let's take a look just a few seconds later.
Faithful slave was put in charge of providing spiritual food for God's people who number into the millions.
So he talks about the faithful slave of Matthew 24, among whom he believes he is, along with the rest of the governing body, being put in charge by God, or he specifically says Jesus, as we'll see, to be in charge, again, over the great crowd, to provide them with their food at the proper time. So let's go forward just a few seconds more, right at minute 11.
Verse 8. Today, Jehovah provides direction to the slave through Jesus. Jesus, in turn, provides direction for his people through the faithful and discreet slave.
Again, making it very plain that they believe they have a special position in relation to God and the Christ, where what they teach comes from Jehovah as direction. Then he states,
We can have, therefore, full confidence in the scriptural insight, understanding, and guidance.
full confidence. And this is from a member of a group that has changed their views probably more times than any other group on the planet. Jehovah's Witnesses associated with the Watchtower Society have changed their views, I would say, in their history, more times than anyone else. And every single time they have had those views put on the same level as the changes they then make. So, why would we have full confidence in someone like that? You know what you can have full confidence in? One God the Father. You know why? Because that's word for word what's in the Bible text, if you believe the Bible, of course. 1 Corinthians 8:6. You don't need to do anything but read it. You know what you can have full confidence in? The name of God, Jah. Revelation 19, Isaiah 12, numerous other times in the Old Testament. You just need to read it. You know what you can have full confidence in? The golden rule. It's never changed. The name of God as Jah has never changed. The belief in the one God, the Father, has never changed. People change it. We know Trinitarians change it. But it has never changed. You can have full confidence in that. Can you have full confidence in views that are interpretations of uncertain chronology and prophecy applications that regularly change? I don't see how. It'd be one thing if he said, look, we know we make a lot of mistakes and we change all the time, but we're really working hard to get this right. So try to have some confidence and patience with us. Even that, right, after making all these mistakes, I would think you would step down. I would think you would give other people an opportunity to do things better. But at a minimum, you should never claim that people have full confidence in what you're telling us is directly from God and Jesus, unless it's explicitly stated in the Bible. It's an interpretation. How could we have full confidence in a prophetic interpretation that is unique to your chronological application that you've changed numerous times? That doesn't make any sense. It's manipulation to tell people to have full confidence in something like that. He goes on to talk about the dangers of rumors, right? Spreading false rumors. He gives the example of, in the Bible, of people using misinformation to mislead people about Jesus' empty tomb. So we know we have to be careful about fake news, misinformation. That's the whole point. That's why we don't trust people. That's why I never want you to trust people. You test what we say, and you trust the evidence if it's okay. All right, now let's move forward to minute 14. And we're going to listen to a few seconds here. We're getting to the most significant part. But we just have a couple more. And then we're going to read some biblical texts. Again, this is why, in part, but this is a big reason why I can no longer support the Watchtower Society. I no longer have confidence I can go back in any meaningful way and do good from within and try to change things in a new direction. I'm already doing that in a way, and I don't need them. I don't need all the baggage that comes with these people and their organization. I don't need the history of false interpretations and incorrect views. I just need the things that are clear in the Bible, things that I can actually use. Let's go ahead and play this clip, same video, and I'll put a link below again so you can listen to the whole thing.
Perfect and never makes mistakes, but
he's saying that they're not perfect, and not saying they're perfect or never make mistakes, which is true, and that's why you never have full confidence in people because we're not perfect and we make mistakes. It's not, by the way, the mistakes they've made and acknowledged that's of most concern to people like me. It's the mistakes they're making right now that they refuse to change, like we should have full confidence, and even worse, as you're going to hear in a moment.
But Jehovah and Jesus trust the imperfect slave.
Jehovah and Jesus trust the imperfect slave. There's not one biblical text that says that. And as we're going to see in a few moments, there are a lot of texts that argue against it. Why would he tell you or me or anybody what Jehovah and Jesus trust? According to Paul in 1 Corinthians 4:5, I did a whole video about it. Do not judge anything before the appointed time. In the context of that text, Paul talks about you can't even trust yourself. The view you have of yourself, you shouldn't even be too confident in that, right? Because the only one who's going to judge you and that matters is God in the Christ, our God in the Christ. So even our own view of ourselves can't be trusted. And yet they're telling us to have complete trust in their view of themselves, which they're not supposed to trust.
Who cares for things to the best of his ability and with the best of motives.
How can someone tell you they have the best of motives with a straight face and expect you to believe that? You can't bear witness about yourself unless you're the Messiah. Right? You don't even know if your motives are correct according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 4. We have to wait for the Lord to arrive to judge the secret things of the heart. So to try to tell us that we should have full confidence in you because your motives are pure, you're just bearing witness to yourself. And so your witness could not possibly be true. Unless you're the Messiah, of course.
Shouldn't we then trust the imperfect slave as well?
No, and no. That makes no sense whatsoever. To tell us, first of all, that God and the Christ completely trust them or trust them. He says it further in a moment, completely. And then use that as a basis, the assumption, which you can't even have confidence in according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 4, about what you think God and Christ think of you, using that assumption, which is contradicted by a lot of evidence, to then ask other people to trust you too. It's manipulation of the highest order. Let's move now to the real big money quote. First, between this part and the quote I'm going to show you next, Loesch talks about the society's view of Matthew 24 and the faithful slave being appointed in 1919 over all the master's things. And he says that shows that the Christ has immense trust in them, which is all a suspect chronology at best. And when you look at their view of the generation as no longer having to be the one that saw the events of 1914, their chronology pointing to both 1914 and 1919 really has no merit. It's lost credibility, and it's losing any credibility it has left, even in the adjustments that they're making, like with the generation. But just because you interpret chronology in the Bible, right? It's not explicit in the Bible, the chronology that leads to 1914 or 1919. It's their interpretation of the chronology and types in the Bible that make them think God's kingdom came in 1914 invisibly, and that they were appointed in 1919. That's not in the Bible. It's just their own view of themselves. What did Jesus say was the way you would know if the teaching was from God or you speak of your own originality? He that speaks of his own originality seeks his own glory. But he that seeks the glory of him that sent him is true. This teaching that allows them to tell you, Watchtower Society members, to listen and have complete trust in them because they were appointed by God in Christ in 1919, that's for their glory. That's about them. That has nothing to do with God's glory. It's a teaching from their own originality. It's not in the text, and it doesn't even make much sense. But they're using that as a basis for trying to get you and me to trust them. Now let's move to the last quote, the main quote in this video that I believe makes plain we can't save this organization. They're blaspheming God's name. They really are. It's incredible, the things they're doing and teaching that are not taught in the Bible, and that, as you're going to see right here, explicitly contradict what is taught in the Bible. Last quote or section, and then we'll go on to some texts.
Since Jehovah God and Jesus Christ completely trust the faithful and discreet slave, should we not do the same?
Let me play that again. I know some of you have heard it, right? These clips have been online and things, but I wanted to watch the whole video, and I did. And I encourage you to do the same. Link below. This quote is so outrageous and unscriptural and defiant of the biblical teaching about whom you should trust. It's incredible.
Immense trust Jesus shows toward them. Since Jehovah God and Jesus Christ completely trust the faithful and discreet slave, should we not do the same?
No. Number one, you don't know and can't know, and so you should not even think to say that God and Christ trust you that way. What if I were to say to you, any of you, God and Jesus completely trust me? So shouldn't you? Doesn't that sounds so just weird, huh? Incredible, really. Especially from a group of people who have not proven reliable on the very things that are unique to what they're teaching, right? You don't need me and you don't need the society to see there's one God the Father, right? It's not necessary to belong to the Watchtower or the Christian Witnesses of Jehovah or any religion to open up a Bible and see 1 Corinthians 8:6 teaches there's one God the Father. Or to open up a Bible in Revelation 19, Isaiah 12, or any other several other texts in the Psalms and see that God's name undisputably in English is Jah. Or that Jesus is the Messiah. Or the golden rule. Right? It's just, where's the text? Open it up. Oh, okay. That's pretty clear. Everything unique to them when it comes to chronology and prophecy requires them, because it's not taught explicitly in the Bible. And things taught explicitly in the Bible about times and seasons, like we don't need anything to be written to us about them, they go against. But what about this trust? Complete trust. First, let's take a look at two more quotes. There's actually a couple more, but that's the money quote. Since Jehovah and Jesus completely trust the slave, them, the leaders of the Watchtower Society, shouldn't we do the same? Calling for complete trust, in addition to speaking for God and Jesus, when they shouldn't even be too confident in their own view of themselves, 1 Corinthians 4. They're telling us what God and Jesus think about them, and it's complete trust, right? Not like just in Matthew 24, maybe in the parable that Jesus gives, not a prophecy, he talks about appointing those whom he approves over his belongings. That doesn't mean he completely trusts them. Wouldn't the master still be watching? He's like never going to check on them again because he found them faithful that one time? That makes no sense. That's not what the text says. And it flies in the face of what we're taught in a number of other texts that we're going to get to in a moment. But let me play just a couple more quotes. All right, so let's move forward. 16, minute 16. Listen to this.
Do you trust? You fully trust in Jehovah, Jesus, and the faithful slave.
Putting themselves right on par with Jehovah and Jesus, just like he did in the money quote I gave, right? Since Jehovah and Jesus completely trust the slave, shouldn't we do the same? Doubling down, tripling down, really, right? Because he said it several times, maybe even quadrupling down. And certainly we get to the quadruple or the quintuple down in the next and last quote I'm going to play. But to say that, to point out that, say, do you trust God? Do you trust the Christ? And do you trust us the same? The answer that should come out of your mouths immediately, Watchtower members, is no. We don't trust you the same. You're humans. You just said you make mistakes. We know you make mistakes, a lot of mistakes. So no, we don't trust you. We trust if you can show us what to do from what we do trust, which is God and Jesus in the Bible, which he doesn't even mention right there. And listen to this next one where he does mention the Bible. Notice where he puts the Bible relative to them. There's two quotes, and we're going to wrap this up and go to some biblical texts. But listen to the way that he puts the Bible in its place relative to them.
And something else we need to trust in, God's word.
Something else, right? This was about 15 seconds right after he said that, do you fully trust in Jehovah, Jesus, and the faithful slave? He said there's something else we need to trust. The Bible. Wouldn't you say at a minimum that the quote from minute 16, second 15 through 22 should have been, do you fully trust in Jehovah, in Jesus, and in the Bible? And then if he really felt compelled to say what he said, to add the slave after those three, and to say there's something else we need to trust, the faithful slave, which is not correct, but to put the Bible after trusting the slave is incredible to me. And it's not just in those last two quotes he does it. Listen to the last quote I'm going to play before we go to the Bible. Minute 17, starting at second 5. This is one of the most disturbing. It's not as disturbing in my view as the since Jehovah and Jesus completely trust us imperfect humans who can't even trust ourselves. Shouldn't we do the same? Listen to this.
Of course, we should trust not only Jehovah, Jesus, the faithful slave, and the Bible.
Jehovah, Jesus, faithful slave, and the Bible. He goes on to talk about how we should also trust some of our brothers. And he uses as an example Paul. So he goes from Jehovah to Jesus, to the slave, then to the Bible, and then to people who wrote part of the Bible, Paul. That's twice he explicitly puts the slave not only on the same level of trust as Jehovah and Jesus, but above or before, in terms of priority, the Bible. And even people who wrote the Bible, if you listen to the rest of what he has to say. But there's no need to play it because I'm summarizing that part for you. The key part is they're putting themselves before the Bible and on par with Jehovah and Jesus. It's so unacceptable that when I heard these things, I realized, well, what good is it going to do me to return and try to proclaim the teachings of the Bible and use those as a basis for making changes from within when they're asking for complete trust in them above the Bible? There's no way I can return and help this organization. They would just resist me and get rid of me as fast as they can because I believe in the Bible. I believe in Jehovah. I believe in the Christ. I trust those three. I do not trust even me, let alone them, without evidence that I can provide to myself or to them, or that they might provide. That's it. You do not trust humans. And you sure should not trust these humans who have made so many mistakes. They're number one. They're in first place when it comes to getting things wrong, outside of the clear, explicit teachings that you just read and you know, okay, that's not wrong if you accept the Bible. All right, now let's go to the Bible. We just read or listened to several quotes from one of the governing body members of the society telling us that God and the Christ completely trust them and that we should therefore do the same. Not partial, not, if they show us the evidence, complete. Right? And that we should trust Jehovah, Jesus, them, and then the Bible. Let's move them out of third place, right next to John, Jesus, and put the Bible back in its place ahead of these people and see what it has to say about trust. And I believe when you read these texts with me, you'll realize it's impossible to go back to this organization and do anything but follow what they say, which is not based on the Bible, at least when it comes to the unique interpretations that they give of things like chronology and prophecy and the requirements of belonging to their group. So let me go ahead and bring up several texts that I have for us that talk specifically about this issue of trust. Does the Bible at all tell us that we should trust humans? Even humans like, kings of Israel or followers of Jesus? Should we trust those? What does the Bible say about trust? Because according to Loesch and the Watchtower Society, we should have complete trust. Not partial. Again, this is complete. Jehovah and Jesus completely trust them, so should we. That's what he said explicitly. That's not what the Bible teaches explicitly. What it does teach is in direct contradiction to what he just said. So let's take a look at several texts. I brought them up here for us. The main text I'm going to read is from the book of Psalms, near the end of this list. But I want to read a few texts in the Psalms leading up to it to show the ongoing theme and teaching of the Bible, and in particular the book of Psalms, although we'll read from a couple other books as well, about trust. Psalm 4:5. Sacrifice the sacrifices of righteousness and trust in Jehovah. Psalm 25:2. O my God, in you I have put my trust. O may I not be ashamed. May my enemies not exult over me. That's what's happening to the society. Its enemies are exulting over it because it's not trusting in Jehovah. They're trusting in themselves and then asking us to do that as well. Psalm 26:1. Judge me, O Jehovah, for I myself have walked in my own integrity, and in Jehovah I have trusted, that I may not wobble. The society is not only wobbling, they're about to collapse. Okay, the weight of their terrible decisions and false teachings in God's name are bringing it to the point of collapse. Because they're not trusting in Jehovah. Psalm 31:6, I do hate those paying regard to worthless, vain idols. Like the society, they're a worthless, vain idol. You should not be looking to them on any level comparable to Jah or Jesus. That's an idol. They've put themselves above everybody else as an idol that you should trust completely. As for me, in Jehovah I do trust. Psalm 31:14, but in you I have put my trust, O Jehovah. I have said you are my God. Psalm 32:10, many are the plans that the wicked one has, but as for the one trusting in Jehovah, loving kindness itself surrounds him. The society has a lot of plans. They mean nothing if they're not directly and explicitly based on the Bible and trusting in Jehovah. Trust in Jehovah and do good. Reside in the earth and deal with faithfulness. Psalm 37:3. Further, he put in my mouth a new song. Praise to our God. Many will see it and will fear, and they will trust in Jehovah. Watchtower Society members, you are swimming in fear. You're afraid of the governing body. You're afraid of the brothers in your congregations, not all of them, because I know some good ones who are trying, but the ones who are not, who are completely trusting in the society, like God in the Christ. You're in fear. And we all know, according to the New Testament, true love has no fear. It throws it out. You can't do that or they'll throw you out. Psalm 44, happy is the able-bodied man that has put Jehovah as his trust. I'm happy. I've never been happier. The only times I get unhappy are when I start to become optimistic about things I can accomplish and then realize that's not going to work. Like changing a group of people who believe so highly of themselves, they think you should completely trust them and that God and Jesus completely trust them. Happy is the able-bodied man that put Jehovah as his trust and that has not turned his face to defiant people. Society will not listen, people. They're not interested in change, nor to those falling away to lies. They've been lying to you people. Jehovah and Jesus do not completely trust them. You are not to completely trust them. The generation that saw the events of 1914 is not going to be the generation that sees the end of this system. Even they don't believe that anymore. Yet they herald it for decades as if it was God's promise. That's a lie. That's a false teaching. That's why you should not have complete trust in their teachings. Psalm 41:9, also the man at peace with me, in whom I trusted. Right now we have a text. We're trusting in men here. Watchtower Society people are like, wait a minute. We can trust in humans now here. No, that one who was at peace with you, whom you trusted, like the society, who was eating bread with you, has magnified his heel against you. They're turning against you, people. They're having you sacrifice your life, sometimes literally, and monetarily, and socially, for things that are not taught in the Bible explicitly. Things that they change over and over again while telling you to trust them completely. That's lifting up their heel against you. That's not caring for you. That's beating you with lies and false teachings while claiming God and Christ trust them to do those things completely. 100%. Right? It's not even 99.9. It's 100. Complete, full trust. That's what Loesch said. Psalm 52:8. But I shall be like a luxuriant olive tree in God's house. I do trust in the loving kindness of God to time indefinite, even forever. Psalm 55:23. But you yourself, O God, will bring them down to the lowest pit. As for blood guilty and deceitful men, the Watchtower is blood guilty by telling people to do things that have cost them their lives when they had no biblical authority to do so. One of those things involves the different uses of blood and blood fractions. One of the things I was most concerned about and that led me to fraction so that I could be away from all these blood guilty and deceitful people who have lied to us and who keep telling us lies, completely trust us. God and the Christ do lie. You Watchtower apologists who are too weak to call these people out in their lies, like Jesus approves of the Christians in Revelation, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. They will not live out half their days. As for me, I shall trust in you. Not you, Brother Loesch. Or Loesch, right? Because if he's not my brother in a Christian sense in which I trust together with him, God and the Christ, he's just Loesch. And he's lost. And he's deceiving you. It doesn't matter how emotional he gets or how nice he seems. None of that means anything. It never did. In fact, the more nice and emotional someone gets to you, that should be a cause of concern. We don't manipulate people that way. We teach them the truth. And then we let them decide. Psalm 56:3, whatever day I get afraid, I, for my part, shall trust even in you, God, not humans. Psalm 56:4, in union with God, I shall praise his word. That thing that Brother Loesch didn't even put in the third, but after the slave who was in the third on equal par with God and the Christ in terms of whom we should trust, we should praise that word, not those who lie to us. In God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? What can Loesch do to me or you? Nothing. So stop being afraid. And do not trust in these people. They should be afraid. In God I have put my trust. I shall not be afraid. What can earthly man do to me? Psalm 62:8. Trust in him at all times. There's your 100%. There's your complete trust. There's your full trust. It's not in men. Before him pour out your heart. God is a refuge for us, not the Watchtower, not an organization of humans who lie to you, who tell you things that could not possibly be true because they contradict the Bible, which we hold as true. Psalm 62:9. Indeed, the sons of earthly men are an exhalation. Nothing. We're nothing. The sons of mankind are a lie. Loesch is a lie. Okay, according to this text, I am a lie. You are a lie. That doesn't mean we always lie, but that's how we should see humans. We're sinful. What does the New Testament teach? Let God be found true, and every man a liar. It's even the title of one of their own books. Every man a liar. I don't want you trusting me. I don't want you trusting Loesch. I don't want you trusting anybody. I want you to believe the evidence, if it's reliable. When laid upon the scales, they are altogether lighter than an exhalation. You're going to put your complete trust in an exhalation, something lighter than an exhalation, something that's a lie. Why? Well, I know why they want you to, because they want you following them and being a part of their group so they can continue to occupy a position over you. Not me. And not anybody who really follows true Christianity. Psalm 84:12, O Jehovah of armies, happy is the man or woman that is trusting in you. Psalm 91:2, I will say to Jehovah, you are my refuge and my stronghold, my God in whom I will trust. Psalm 93:5, your own reminders have proved very trustworthy. The Society's reminders have not. They have proven untrustworthy time and time again. Fine, you're imperfect. You make mistakes. Great. Stop putting yourself in the position of anything else. Okay? Imperfect people do not deserve complete trust. Imperfect people do not put themselves above the Bible or the people that wrote it. Holiness is befitting your own house, O Jehovah, for length of days. Psalm 111:7. The works of your hands are truth and judgment. Trustworthy are all the orders he gives. Not the orders of men. He gives. God. Psalm 115:9. O Israel, trust in Jehovah. He is their help and their shield. Verse 10. O house of Aaron, put your trust in Jehovah. He is their help and their shield. Verse 11. You that fear Jehovah, trust in men? No. You that fear Jehovah, trust in Jehovah. People who come to me often say, why did you leave Jehovah? I haven't left Jehovah. Does it look like I've left the God of the Bible to you? Really? You must not be watching that much, because that's what I tell you all the time I do. They mean by that the organization. The organization has made its members think of it as Jehovah. That's why they call themselves the truth. In addition to having their members think of them as Jehovah, and if you leave them, you leave Jehovah, they take the title of the Messiah from John 14:6. The way, the truth, and the life. Jesus did not give you this. You Watchtower apologists who have been too cowardly to stand up to liars in your organization, I want you to redeem yourselves by doing this. Stand up now and resist. Tell the governing body and everyone who follows it with complete trust to stop taking the title of the Messiah as if they're the truth. Right? That is blasphemous. No one takes the titles of the Messiah because no one else deserves them. Certainly not a group of humans who have failed time and again for over 100 years. To call yourself the truth is blasphemous. That's the Messiah. Psalm 118:8. It is better to take refuge in Jehovah than to trust in earthly man. I can verify that. I had to do that. It's so much better than trusting in men, because I don't have to completely trust them in what they say. I don't even completely trust me and what I think about what I say. I just look at the evidence, the explicit teaching of the text, and I trust in God to judge me correctly. That's it. Better to take refuge in Jehovah than to trust in nobles. We're getting to my main text here, both in terms of progression and in terms of content. Some of you may know where I'm going. Psalm 119:42, that I may answer the one reproaching me with a word, for I have trusted in your word. It's kind of like Proverbs 27:11, one of my favorite texts, one of the favorite texts of someone whom I know, but who doesn't trust in the text, who trusts in these humans more so than trusting in God's word. You want to answer the one reproaching Jehovah? You're not going to do it with the society. You're not going to do it with Watchtower literature. That's going to cause more reproach on him because they keep dragging him in to their false teachings and incorrect interpretations, and then telling everybody it's from him. Well, it's from him. He's the one directing us. No, he's not. So stop telling us that. Those trusting in Jehovah are like Mount Zion, which cannot be made to totter, but dwells to time indefinite. You know, Watchtower members, Watchtower Society, you're wobbling. You're on the verge of collapse, like we read earlier in the application of the text. We're not. We're as solid as you can be. Why? We just require 3 that are explicitly taught in the text. How are you going to make that collapse? You can't. Because it has nothing to do with me. Christian Witnesses of Jah is an identity. It's not a corporation. It's not even, I would call, a religion. It's just how we identify, like Christian. But because of all the others who call themselves Christian, but who invalidate God's word with their tradition, we set ourselves apart so that we can say, look, this is what we're about. Following the Christ, Christian, worshiping the God Jah, one God the Father, Jah. We bear witness. We're telling people about them. Watchtower people, you're bearing witness to these men. And they're asking you to do it. They're telling you, look, God in Christ completely trust us. Shouldn't you do that too? Go out there and tell people, this is us. This is who. You're bearing witness to men on the same level as if they're God and the Christ. And that's why I'm a Jehovah's Witness, because of God and the Christ, because of what the Bible teaches about a person who believes in the God of the Bible and who speaks the truth no matter what the consequence. That's a Jehovah's Witness. That's why even though I don't support the Watchtower Society, I am a Jehovah's Witness. And I always will be, in the biblical sense, not your corporate or religious identity sense, but in the actual action sense of what I'm doing. The actual witnessing to Jehovah and to the Christ, not to men. In the morning cause me to hear your loving kindness, for in you I have put my trust. Make known to me the way in which I should walk, for to you I have lifted up my soul. Psalm 146:1. Now we're at the primary text that I believe absolutely refutes Losch's lies that God and the Christ completely trust the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, whom they call the faithful slave. Praise Jah, you people. Praise Jehovah, O my soul. Verse 2, I will praise Jehovah during my lifetime. I will make melody to my God as long as I am. That's a Jehovah's Witness right there. You do that, and you praise Jah here, you're a Jehovah's Witness. You're a Christian witness of Jah, and it has nothing to do with anything else. Now, the direct refutation of Losch and what he asked everyone to do, to completely trust humans, him included, and even telling us that God and the Christ do too. Here's what God's word says about trusting in humans. Do not do not put your trust in nobles, nor in the son of earthling man, to whom no salvation belongs. Is Losch the son of earthling man? Even in terms of being a noble in the society, right? They're the highest level. And even if they're not as high as a noble as is spoken of here, then they're lower. And we're not supposed to trust in people that are higher, because they're all the son of earthling man. Why his spirit goes out, he goes back to his ground. In that day his thoughts do perish. Happy is the one who has the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in Jehovah his God, not men. Do not put your trust in men. You Watchtower people, you quote this text all the time, usually to try to tell us that we can't even try to better our society because you misapply it to seem like we're trusting in politicians when we vote or get involved to try to change the things they're doing wrong. How is that trusting in humans when you're acting against humans to try to make society better in which to live? It's not. But you guys believe this text. You quote it all the time like that. Why don't you quote it to Brother Losch, play his talk, link below, and say, Brother Losch, I'm coming to you in the spirit of Matthew 18. I have something against you. You asked us to completely trust you. That's a false teaching. That's against the Bible. I want you to stop that right now, and we'll be fine, right? We don't need to form a judicial committee like you also incorrectly teach. That's not in the Bible. Matthew 18 from the Messiah is in the Bible. You go to the person. You Watchtower apologists who have been too cowardly to do anything like me or Rolf Rulli have done, and you sit there and you let these people lie to millions of people. Why? Because you're afraid, and true love throws fear outside. Throw that fear outside, Watchtower apologists. Confront Loesch. Play his talk, link below. Read the text and tell him, I want you to stop teaching that. Are you going to stop teaching that, or do I have to go get someone else? If he says, I'm sorry, brother, that was incorrect, I'm going to go tell the rest of the governing body, we forgot about this text. We're not going to teach that anymore. We're not going to put ourselves on the same level as God and the Christ anymore. We're not going to put the Bible after us in the order of priority anymore. We're not going to ask people to fully trust or completely trust us lying humans anymore. I don't think you remaining Watchtower apologists have the courage. And that's why you're still there. Because you lack courage. And you'd rather allow these people to lie and deceive other people while you just sit there with no courage. But if you do find the courage to actually follow the Bible and confront someone who's not following the Bible, like Jesus says in Matthew 18, you go to that person. And if they listen, you gain them. That's it. It's done. You don't go running around and gossiping to everyone. And if he doesn't listen, you take someone else. And if he won't listen to you and someone else, take your whole congregation. Can you do that? I'd love to see that. I don't think you can do it. I don't trust in you. Show me the reasons. Show me your evidence. That's what I'll believe. I won't believe you. I'll believe what you do. But the idea that you could do it is more believable than two. And two is more believable than that you could bring a whole congregation of Watchtower Society witnesses to confront the governing body. That almost seems impossible to me because they have such tight control over everybody. Even people like me and Rolf who know enough to maybe help out in some of these very ways I'm talking to you about can't go back. We can't even help out like that because I couldn't even get a whole congregation of people to follow me and confront people who are not teaching the Bible. That's what I mean by following me. Following me to this brother here, Loesch, and say, listen, you didn't listen to me, you didn't listen to me and this other person. I've got the whole congregation here now. Are you going to follow this text or not? Otherwise, we're just going to ignore you. Right? We won't shun you. We won't be like you are to all these people and that you teach other people to be like. But we're not going to associate with you. We're just going to treat you like a worldly person, high and by, and not get into any deep spiritual discussion with you. Why? You won't listen to a simple text. Right? If we can't get the governing body or any of you Watchtower apologists to follow a simple text that says, do not trust in humans or the son of earthling men. If we can't get you to follow that explicit text, it's not controversial in any way. Well, what's the point of doing anything else? It's like with the Trinitarians, right? If we can't get them to use the term God the way it's used in the Bible, what's the point? Why go through all these different texts on whether or not they call Jesus God in the Bible? They won't even listen to how the word God is used in the Bible, right? Let alone accept explicit text, one God the Father. If we can't get them to accept that, and they have to add two more persons and claim that's in the Bible when it's not, what's the difference? We've just got different people who won't follow the Bible. And it's that simple. Because I don't trust any human. And I don't want you trusting me. We trust what's in the Bible for everybody to see. So if they're not going to listen to what anybody can see and what they quote repeatedly, what's the point of going back? What's the point of me being optimistic about being able to help out and make changes to get us away from all that and back to the text. Let's conclude with a few more texts. Proverbs 3:5, trust in Jehovah with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. Just like 1 Corinthians 4, we can't even trust our own selves anymore. We rely on God. We're not supposed to judge anything before the appointed time until the Messiah arrives. Right? We can point out what's not taught in the text. Right? I'm not saying Brother Loesch can never come back or that he's not going to be saved no matter what. He's lying. Yeah, I am allowed to confront someone who is openly lying and not teaching the text, just like Paul confronted Peter, someone everyone knows and can see in the text was appointed by Jesus to feed his sheep. Paul confronted Peter and told him to stop teaching what is false. Stop making these distinctions between Greeks and Jews that are false. We have that right. It's right there in the text for us, exemplified by Paul and others. Jesus, when he confronted the religious leaders who oversaw the temple of Jah, will leave the full judgment to God and the Christ. We don't lean on our own understanding, though, and then use that, our own understanding, as a basis for forcing people to completely trust us. That's what they're doing. They're adopting their own understanding of biblical chronology as they apply it to 1914 and 1919 and saying, completely trust us. This is how we understand this. This is our understanding of these prophecies, Matthew 24, so now completely trust us. God and Jesus completely trust us. Why don't you? Well, because that's your own understanding. That's not what the Bible tells us to do. The Bible tells us the exact opposite. That's why we don't completely trust you, and why we're very concerned that you would even ask anybody to do that. And then tell us that God and the Christ completely trust you, when you couldn't even possibly know that unless you want to adopt what the text says, which is from them, in our view, that no, they don't trust you. We're not to trust any human, so why would they trust you? Just because they, in your view, appoint you over things doesn't mean they completely trust you all the time. You're just demonstrating that you're reliable, and so they continue to give you more until they can't trust you anymore, or you've reached the limit of what you're capable of doing. You're applying it, this Watchtower Society, in ways that are far beyond these texts and far beyond even Matthew 24. In all your ways take notice of him, and he himself will make your path straight. Humans can't make your path straight. We can only help you along the way if what we say is correct. Do not become wise in your own eyes. How is the society not doing that? When they're taking chronology and prophecy and their understanding of it to conclude we should completely trust them, how is that not being wise in your own eyes? It's not explicitly taught in the text. It's from your own originality because it's not taught in the text. And you're using it in a way to tell other people what is right? It seems like you think you're wise in your own eyes. Fear Jehovah and turn away from bad. You know what's bad? Completely trusting in any human. Turn away from that. Turn away from these humans who are teaching you that. Fear Jehovah. Proverbs 29:25, trembling at men is what lays a snare or a trap. Watchtower Society members, you're caught in a trap. And I can't help you with that other than show you how to get out of the trap by turning away from what is bad. Turn to Jehovah and the Christ. Follow the golden rule. You can do this. These teachings are clear for you. You don't even need me or anybody else. You may have me and some other people now that'll make it easier than when people like me had to move out and start doing what we do. But you have to get out of the trap yourself. You have to stop believing these humans because you're explicitly told not to do it. You're just having a problem up here because you're afraid of them. They've created conditions that make it difficult for you because you might lose your whole family over them. But what did Jesus tell you? He that has not left father, sister, mother, brother, or family members for my sake is not worthy of me. Right? We don't want to have to go through that. But if your family members are trapped and they don't want to get out of the trap, you've got to leave them. You've got to get out of the trap and hopefully by doing so help them get out of the trap. It will do you no good to die in the trap with them. Isaiah 12:2. Look, God is my salvation. I shall trust and be in no dread, no fear. For Jehovah is my strength and my might, and he came to be the salvation for me. Trust in Jehovah, you people, for all times. All of it. 100%. Complete trust. Full trust. Not in men who lie. In Jehovah. In Jehovah. The rock of times indefinite. That's why I can't go back, everyone. That's why I can't go back to a group of people who don't follow these explicit teachings of the text. All Loesch had to do was teach those texts, was read those texts, or even just a few of them. Then we'd have one less problem within the society, and then maybe, if they weren't asking for such complete trust, full trust, saying that God and Jesus trust them in that way and we should too, if we didn't have that problem, it'd be a lot easier for me to be with you. And I might even be able to help out from within and take the good things from your religion, leave the bad, and create something new that's not so bad and that's actually good. It's a tall order given all the things that are facing the organization. But if we can't even get past this issue of trust, then there's no way I would be able to do anything more than I'm doing now. And that is help people follow the God of the Bible, to accept the Messiah of the Bible, and to live according to the rule they gave us that's in the Bible. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And so I hope it's been clear through this video that I am one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I plan on remaining one of Jehovah's Witnesses as a Christian witness of Jah. And why I cannot support the Watchtower Society. Because it comes down to one simple question, really. The very question Loesch asks in the video link below. Whom do you trust?